On the June 8th installment of Backpack Radio, Vocab and Pastor Bob interviewed Jeff Cran of Chosen People Ministries. They spent most of the first segment discussing his testimony and biography. Jeff grew up in a Reformed Jewish family. No, that doesn't mean Calvinist Jews, but rather Reformed Jews are the most liberal and postmodern of the Jewish faith. His grandfather was an Orthodox conservative Jew and ensured that he had a good Jewish education and upbringing, although his parents were less observant. With regard to his grandparents, Jeff heard the classic Orthodox Jewish objections to Christianity, while his parents taught him the more secular objections. And from this, Jeff feels like he received some of his best apologetics training even before his conversion. It wasn't until Jeff started to question the atonement that he started to explore Christianity. It was then he came to recognize that there are no practicing Jews that observe the Leviticus 16 sacrificial system, and it led him to ask the question, where's the blood? After all, if God is a loving God, he must have given his people a provision in the absence of the temple since its destruction. That's when Jeff came face to face with Isaiah 53, and that showed him the contingency that God gave his people in the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Jeff came to faith in 1982 after a study of Isaiah 53 when he realized that the prophet could not possibly be writing about the nation of Israel as he had been taught, as there is no logical way that Israel could pay for their own sin in verse 6, and the nation of Israel never suffered in silence as is shown in verse 7, and finally the picture of the resurrection he was able to draw out of verse 12. Isaiah 53 could only be speaking of Jesus Christ. In the final segment, they discussed how to deal with faith and works, as well as how to approach the Trinity with Jews in communicating the gospel. They discussed the importance of Galatians and James and how instrumental those books can be to evangelizing Jewish people. Jewish people understand covenants, and Jeff talked about the importance of communicating God's covenant promises from the Old Testament. They digressed back to the Trinity and discussed Exodus 16, Genesis 18, Exodus 3, and Hebrews 1, and other passages that are effective to help Jews understand this all-important doctrine. To close the show, Jeff gave a lightning-fast answer as to why the Apocrypha is not considered part of the Old Testament. Write this one down, folks. Jesus says, "You've killed all the prophets from Abel to Zechariah." Now, the Jewish order of the scripture was the law, the prophets, and the writings in Jesus' day. The last book of the Jewish Bible is 2 Chronicles, and that's where you find Zechariah, and Abel is found in Genesis, the first book. Jesus upholds the Jewish canonization of the Old Testament. Jeff very concisely demonstrates that the Roman Catholic Church is misguided in their belief that the Apocrypha is inspired because Jesus didn't affirm its inspiration. And that's this week's report on Backpack Radio.